Do you want to get your cards graded through PSA but don't know where to start? Do you wish that there was an all-inclusive guide to show you how you can go ahead and do your own submissions, as well as give you alternative routes to go ahead and get your cards submitted? All that and more on today's episode of Beginner's Guides. But first, attention all One Piece fans. The Buzz will be doing a giveaway for this beautiful illustration box number 1 featuring the Boa Hancock and Nami promo cards to one lucky subscriber once we hit 1,000. To enter, all you need to do is like, comment, and subscribe, as well as be a resident of the United States. Anyways, guys, that's it for now, so I'll send you right back to the video. What's going on, guys? My name is Nick, and this is One Piece Beginner's Guides, where I do my best to teach you everything you need to know about collecting the One Piece trading card game. On today's episode, it's all about PSA and getting your cards graded to PSA. If you haven't already, guys, highly recommend you watch every other episode in this series prior to watching this one. I'm making these videos chronologically in hopes that you follow it and it helps you along step by step in your collecting journey. If you haven't already, guys, I actually went ahead and made a playlist, which you can watch right here. And it'll have everything that I think you need to know prior to getting to this step in the process. I will say, most notably, the episode you should watch is last week's episode in particular, which I'll also put up independently right here, where I go through each one of the grading services so you can figure out which one you want to utilize when you get to the point of wanting to submit your own cards. All right, guys, without any further ado, let's get right underway to the first step, and that is selecting what cards to grade. All right, guys, so the first step in the process of wanting to submit your cards to get graded is to first know which ones you want to submit. Now, I will say first and foremost, what I'm going to tell you is not something that you have to practice or that you should feel like you need to practice. I'm going to recommend that you guys submit the rarest cards that are out there. Of course, is a safe bet and guarantee that you're going to get better retained value over time with those cards. However, if you want to collect every single Dracula Mihawk card that has ever been created, regardless if it's a rare, common, uncommon, or an SR, go ahead and do that, guys. If you want to get them all graded sequentially, and that's what you want to have in your own personal collection, I'm not going to stop you, and I'm not going to deter you here. At the end of the day, this is all about collecting, and you should collect what you like. Now, what I will say is that what I've noticed through my own experience is the cards that retain the most amount of value over time and the ones that are worth getting graded are going to be the rarer cards that hit, aka SPs, mangas, the newly introduced super rare cards, as well as promo cards. So typically those are a safe bet to get graded, and you'll also see a difference in terms of value between those in a PSA 10 or a 10 in any grading service versus a rare copy, which is what I want you to pay attention to and I want you to be able to do. So what I'm going to do here is link you to the very first video in the series right here, where I give you an introduction in terms of what cards you should be collecting, and I actually break down a little bit of a comparison showing you how there are many cards that go up in value if you get them graded versus keeping them raw. And those are the ones that I don't want you keeping in your binder. Those are the ones that if you think they're worthy of a 10, I want you to go ahead and send off to PSA just so you can have that preservation of the card in the long term, as well as that increase in value through a short investment of time and money if you have access to that. All right, guys, now that I've told you what cards you should be looking out for and which cards you should be looking to send to PSA, let's go ahead and move on to the next step in the process, which is scanning your cards. All right, guys, so the first thing I'm going to discuss outside of you selecting what cards you want to submit is what I think the most important step in the process is, and that is scanning your cards. So what scanning your cards is looking your cards over and being able to utilize your judgment and your experience to tell what you think the card grade is going to be. Now, what I will say is that for One Piece in its current state, I would not send any card to get graded that I didn't think was a PSA 10. For other games like Pokemon, for example, when you're dealing with much more vintage cards, there is typically a market surrounding cards that are graded outside of a 10. So if you have a super vintage card in Pokemon and you want to get it graded and you think that it might be a 7 or 8, you can still have a pretty high retained value compared to in One Piece, where there isn't really that vintage lot to be able to do that, and it's pretty much shooting for a 10, or else you're going to be losing money on your card with the grading service fee combined. So what I have here are 3 cards in front of me, and you're probably thinking, Nick, why is there such a weird variety of cards? As you see here, we have the Izo from PRB01. We have the manga event card of Zoro, the Demon Osra Blades from OP12 in the center, and then we have the Rob Lucci SP from OP09. These are cards that are in my personal collection, And the reason why I wanted to utilize them is because I think they do a good job of hammering home what I'm going to tell you need to know when it comes to scanning your cards, which is know when to submit and know versus when not to submit. So the first card we're going to look over is going to be this ESO card right here, right? So you're looking at this ESO card, and when you're scanning the card, what you're going to want to do is making sure that it's not in any penny sleeve. You're going to want to make sure that you have the card here in front of you so you can see all the perfections and potential defects in there. And we're going to look here on this ESO card is you're going to see that the right side of the card is much thicker than the left side of the card. So even though there's this facade going around that every card in One Piece has perfect QC, there are plenty of cards I've seen that have off-centering problems, just like in every card game, just not nearly as often as Pokemon or other card games. So the QC is really good on One Piece. However, again, first thing you want to do, guys, you want to look over the centering on your card, and you can see right away that this card is off-centered. It's going to be right heavy. Look top-bottom centering as well. Top-bottom centering looks pretty much even, maybe slightly thicker on the bottom, but I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. Again, you're looking for any whitening on the card as well as any scratches, dirt marks, anything like that, print lines that might be negating whether or not this card is a PSA 10. And now we're going to flip over to the back of the card, which I think is the most important thing. And you're going to see here again, typically what I've noticed when it comes to card games is that the front centering matches the back centering. So what I'll do with the full art cards where you're like, Nick, there's no front centering on there, I'll show you what I mean. But right here in the back centering, you see that left side is much thicker than the right side. Also, you notice that the bottom looks a little bit thicker than the top. Again, we're looking for any whitening. Don't see any whitening here. Looking on the corners, the edges, to be able to determine what we think the grade on this card is going to be. I would personally not submit this card. I think it'd be a 9. And again, as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to One Piece presently, you should not be sending any card that you don't think is going to be a 10 worthy, just because there's not any retained value. You're just going to be throwing money away on that card to get a 9. Again, in the future, hopefully we'll see that price increase for those 9s and 8s like you have in Pokemon for some of the old, more vintage stuff, but currently in the card game, not there. So that's it for the ESO card. Next up, we're going to go with the 9 blade style Asura. Okay, guys. So you're going to see here, very hard to tell the blade, very hard to tell the centering on the front of the card because there is no lines on the card like there is with this ESO, right? Like you can't see any lines showing a clear border, right? So you're probably thinking, how do you tell? And the easiest way to tell is by looking at the back of the card. So again, for the front of the card, looking for any scuffs, any marks, any indentations. You're going to see here, once we flip it to the back, that's going to give us a clear image of what our centering is looking like. Centering maybe looking just a little bit right heavy, not too bad. Centering top bottom looks pretty even, maybe a little bottom heavy. And then you're looking for that white on the corners and edges, not seeing anything there. This one, I think, would be worthy of a shot. The centering isn't nearly as bad as it is on the ESO card. One thing when it comes to PSA that's really important to note is that for these kind of cards that are full arts, typically PSA is much more careful when it comes to your front centering versus your back centering. They'll let some stuff in the back go away because at the end of the day, when you're displaying a card, you want it to be the front of the card that is showing off in front of people. That's going to be the part people are looking at. So I am going to be sending this card to PSA. I think it's worthy of a 10, and I think it's got a good shot at it. So I will go ahead and throw it back in the sleeve, and we'll be sending that bad boy off to PSA soon enough. Next up, we have the Rob Lucci right here. So we'll grab the penny sleeve for it. Rob Lucci SP right here, guys. Again, similar to the front of the Demon Asura manga event card. We're just looking here on the front for any whitening, any scratches, anything that's going to be a clear indicator that this card is not going to be a 10, which just looking through right now, not seeing anything. Again, these SPs are absolutely beautiful from OP09. Now we're going to flip the card around. And again, that back centering will be a clear indicator of what the front centering is looking like. Just looking off in this situation, you're going to see that looks very well centered. Top bottom centering looks pretty clean as well. Not seeing any white on there. I think this is a clear 10. Gonna be sending off to PSA as well. So again, guys, wanted just to give you 3 different examples that you can look at when it comes to scanning your cards. And this truly is the most important step in the process because a lot of people just blindly submit their cards to the grading services without looking them over in One Piece because they think the QC is so good. And I'm here to say that no matter what, even if the QC is perfect on the card game, still look your cards over. You want to double check, make sure you're not just throwing money away off of some obvious defect or blemish on the card that can prevent you from getting a 10. All right, guys, now that I've showed you how you can go ahead and scan your cards, let's move on to the next part of this video where I'm going to show you how you can go ahead and do a submission. All All right, guys, so the first one I'm gonna show you what to do is I'm gonna show you how you can submit your own cards by yourself without needing the help or assistance of anyone else. The way I'm gonna organize this is I'm gonna organize the video based off the hardest thing that is most time consuming versus the easiest alternative routes that you can utilize when it comes to getting your cards submitted through PSA. So the first thing we're gonna see right now is we're gonna look at the PSA website. You're gonna see here, it's gonna tell you to do a start submission in this upper right-hand corner. But before we get there, one thing I wanna remind you is to always make sure you know what you're paying. And this is why it's so intermingled with the first part of this video, which is knowing what cards you're gonna wanna get graded. Again, if you're getting a lot of higher tier cards graded, you're gonna have to utilize one of these more expensive services, which don't have the same restrictions as the cheaper alternative routes. Now, if you do have a bunch of cards that you're submitting that are underneath $500, you can utilize this value bulk deal again. But you're gonna have a collector's club only membership. So again, guys, knowing what you're gonna pay is all gonna depend on what you're submitting, as well as whether or not you have a collector's club membership. This is why this is the more difficult section, I believe, is to submit the cards by yourself. Because, for example, if you don't intend to submit probably more than 25 or 50 cards in a year, I would say avoid collector's club, just because you're not gonna get the full value out of that compared to someone who's constantly submitting. So probably best to just go with the value route on that one for $25. However, I will say Collector's Club does give you a lot of benefits. I mentioned this in the last video. Most notably, if you're a One Piece collector, those PSA promo cards, which again, I'll put up right here, of Boa, Shanks, and Luffy. They're pretty cool. They come out every year with the PSA magazine. To get that, all you need to do is you need to have a Collector's Club subscription, and they'll send you it in the PSA magazine. But again, guys, if you're not doing a lot of submissions, you're not doing it often, I would avoid paying for Collector's Club. So then you're gonna be paying $24.99 a card up until a value of $500, of course, unless you're getting to the more expensive stuff, mangas, promo cards, serial cards. All that stuff is gonna be way more expensive, and you're gonna have to pay this increased graded fee for that. So know what you're submitting in advance, just so you can have a pulse on what you're gonna be paying. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and hit the start submission. What it's gonna do is gonna prompt you to log in. I went ahead and logged in my own personal account. So then it's gonna give you two options here. You can either do a classic submission or you can do an assisted submission. So for this one, this is only available for trading card game grading, which One Piece is a trading card game, so this does apply. We can do start assisted submission. From here, you're gonna type in a card. We're not gonna type in the card in situation, but the way it would work is that you would add a card in, put it in the description, keep on adding them to your submission, continue to review, and eventually you would ship your cards out. Now, the one thing that's important to remember about PSA is that they have some strict shipment requirements. Most notably is that anytime you submit a card, you have to submit it in I believe this is a card sleeve. So a little bit different than a top loader. This is one that PSA actually returned back to us. And we had a card that didn't end up getting graded, so I kind of ripped the tag off there a little bit. But again, you're gonna need one of these card sleeves. Every one of your cards is gonna have to be submitted in these card sleeves when you're shipping it out to them. And then, of course, you're going to be responsible for pretty much all the hard work, packaging up your cards, making sure they're secured in some safe packaging, covering the insurance costs for all that stuff as well. So, of course, guys, make sure you're equating all that stuff. This is one of the big turnoffs that pushes a lot of people away from doing their own personal submissions through PSA, is that it's very labor intensive. It can take a good amount of time to go ahead and get that submission prepared with not only scanning your cards, but getting them packed up in one of these guys, getting them packed up in a box securely with some bubble wrap and all that stuff. So again, a little bit more labor intensive, but of course it's going to be likely one of the cheapest alternatives that you can do, especially if you're spending a lot of stuff in bulk. So now that I've showed you how you can go ahead and submit your cards by yourself online, let's move on to my favorite way to submit your cards, which is through a middleman service. All right, guys, moving along, we're going to be discussing middleman services, which is my favorite thing to utilize when it comes to getting my cards graded through PSA. Now, the way a middleman service operates is typically a local card shop will partner with PSA. There'll be a registered PSA dealer. I don't even think they need to partner with PSA to be able to do this. But however, typically there'll be a PSA dealer. What that means is that they'll do submissions for other people on their behalf, and they'll directly send them to PSA for you. They takes care of all the hard work I just mentioned of having to go through and package your cards, put them in one of the card sleeves, as well as having to package it and ship it to PSA. So it takes away all the labor intensive stuff and makes it really easy for you just to go to your local card shop, drop your cards off, and that card shop will take care of the rest. The other really cool thing about that is Typically, when it comes to pricing, it's right about the same pricing that you're going to be seeing off of the PSA website. If you don't have Collectors Club, the way it usually operates is that these shops get the Collectors Club. They charge you a small fee between about $2.50 to $5 a card, depending on what you're submitting. And then you pay between $20 to $25 on your end to submit those cards through them. And they get your cards back to you over time. Again, this can vary though, depending on what you're submitting. For example, if you're submitting a manga or SP serialized card, super expensive card, promo card, something that hits that limit of over $500, you're going to have to be paying the increased costs on the grading service. But what I have noticed is that there isn't typically a premium on top of that for Middleman. So for example, the last 2 to 3 submissions I've done have all been the 10-day turnaround time, which costs $75 on PSA's website. And that's what I've paid my Middleman service to get the cards graded for me. So there's no premium on there compared to sending it in under the Collectors Club only pricing versus the value pricing at $25. So seems pretty straightforward. I've never had any issues with it. Of course, knock on wood. As I've always said throughout the series, guys, always make sure to vet whoever you're giving your cards to. Make sure you're reading reviews on your local game store if they do submissions through PSA as a middleman. Make sure that you're asking around people to see what their impressions are of their middleman service. Always important to make sure that your stuff is safe and secure, and you never really know nowadays what people's reputation is. So go ahead and make sure you ask around, do some research, be diligent about that before you just give anyone your cards. Now, the other thing about middleman services that some offer, I will say, not every card shop offers, that I think is really, really helpful, is they typically offer a free scanning service. So one of the main people I used to go to for middleman services was Lucky Vault, which I'll put their information up right here. And what Lucky Vault did as part of the process is anytime you drop your cards off to get graded, they would do a free scan of the card for you, which, as I just showed you, look it over, give you an estimation of what they think the grade is going to be on the card to assist you in determining whether or not you want to get it graded. Now, of course, while there's a lot of experts who do a lot of submissions at these card shops, at the end of the day, PSA is their own entity, and you never really know what your card grade is going to be, regardless of how well you scan it, how many people look it over and think it's going to be a 10. One guy, PSA, can give it an 8, and that's your grade, right? So I will say there's been plenty of situations where I was told, like, hey, I think this card is a 9, and I said, oh, whatever, I'll send it off anyways and see what I get, and it comes back as 10. And the flip side of that also happened where myself and the person scanning the card are like, oh yeah, no, this is a clear 10, and then it comes back as an 8 or a 9. So again, part of the process, guys, never expect 100% guarantee or 100% 10 percentage when you get any card graded. Typically what you want to shoot for is about 80%. That's really, really good, really high. 80% of your cards coming back as a PSA 10 means you're doing your job and you're getting some good grades. So again, while we all hope that every card we submit gets a 10, the reality is that's not likely the case. So you want to shoot for 80%. That's a good sign. But as I was mentioning, not every card shop will do that. We actually moved away from the location where Lucky Vault was located at, so we've been utilizing another card shop for our middleman services. They don't do any scanning there, so Dom and I have been really diligent in looking over every card we submit to PSA, as there's no one really to blame but ourselves in that one. All right, guys, now that I've showed you how you can go ahead and utilize middleman services, as well as discuss the positives and negatives of it, highly recommend you guys look into that. Call your local game store, see if they offer a middleman service. Saves you a lot of time, effort, and for the most part, depending on what you're submitting, you'll typically be paying right around the same price that PSA is going to be asking you to do anyways. It'd be really helpful. I'm going to tell you how you can go ahead and submit cards in person through PSA. All right, guys, final step in this video, I'm going to be telling you how you can go ahead and submit your cards in person through PSA. There's actually a couple options, one being a newer one that just came out a couple months ago. The first one is one that's been around for a while, which is you go to a card show or card convention and PSA is there as a vendor. Typically what will happen there is you'll go over to the PSA booth. They'll have you do this pretty much the same thing you do on the mobile app or online and plug in your personal information. But the difference is that instead of having to worry about shipping your cards and packaging them, PSA will take them in right there and they will submit them in via hand delivery. So again, saves a lot of time and hassle. But the flip side of that is how often are you at a card show or a card convention to be able to actually submit your cards can be a little bit difficult, especially if you're in a more rural area, because again, PSA is not going to show up to every single card show. They're going to be pretty selective, wanting to go to the bigger national ones. However, if you're there and you're locally, save your cards, bring them there with you, go ahead and just drop them all off, do one PSA submission. I will say though, make sure guys, whatever you're dropping off, you still need to put them in the card sleeves. I did my own personal submission at Collect-A-Con in LA this year of my Vegito card that I got signed by Sean Schimmel and Chris Sabat, and I did not have one of these on me. Luckily, PSA did give me one, but again, if you're submitting a bunch of cards, make sure you do the prep work of putting the cards in the card sleeve, as well as, again, scanning your cards. PSA will not be doing that for you. They will, however, accept your cards for you and assist you in creating the submission yourself. So it helps a lot in that labor-intensive work. So that's the first way you can submit cards in person. The second way, which is a way I have not personally tried, but I want to try, is that PSA recently opened up a branch in Burbank, California. Again, if you're in a rural area, you're not going to have access to this yet. However, if you're in Southern California area like I am, this is a possibility for you where you can go to that branch location and you can drop your cards off in person. I imagine it's probably really similar to what it's like dropping cards off in person at a card show or convention, in that you just show up there, you drop your cards off, you fill out a form, and they assist you with the labor-intensive part of it. Again, can't say for certain that's what it's like. I've never personally done it, but it is another alternative route if you are located in Southern California to go ahead and submit your cards in person instead of having to ship your cards directly to PSA. All right, guys, now that I've told you all the ways you can go ahead and get your cards over to PSA, let's move on to the conclusion of this video. All right, guys, first and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for getting to this point in the video. I really appreciate the continued support you guys have and am very, very thankful for the opportunity to make this content for you all. If you can, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know how you feel about this video. Do you think this information was helpful? Was it redundant? Do you feel like it wasn't helpful? Let me know in the comments. Always looking to have a discourse and conversation with you guys. Really, really great stuff. I will say in conclusion of my overall take, I don't think it matters what grading service you utilize, so long as you get your cards graded. I think every card over a certain amount of money should be graded, or if it has some particular amount of preciousness to you, probably important to get it graded just for the pure reason that it preserves the card over the long term. But again, guys, let me know what you think. Let me know if this information helped you. Let me know if this made you want to go get your cards graded through PSA, or maybe you looked outside and found a middleman service and they're taking care of your submission for you now. But hope you guys have a great day, and I'll catch y'all on the next one.